There are moments in life, especially when we have already walked nearly half of the road, when we suddenly realize that human strength does not lie in the youthful years full of energy, but in the ability to stand firm after the times we felt like we had completely collapsed. People talk a lot about faith, but very few talk about the very real feeling when our own faith is shaken by nameless things, an unexpected event, a disappointment that keeps repeating, a prayer that has not been answered, or simply the tiredness that has built up over the years. There are days when we open our eyes and feel an emptiness inside. It is not because we no longer believe in God, but because we no longer know how to take the next step. The ones who were once the strongest also have moments of weakness. The ones who once placed their whole lives on the promises of God can also come to a point where they stand in front of the mirror and ask themselves, do I still have enough strength to believe? When we were young, it was easy for us to believe in big miracles, in rapid change, in prayers that are answered immediately. But as the years pass, faith begins to take on a different tone, deeper, slower, and less showy. Instead of chasing after feelings, faith begins to work in very small, very quiet things. Sometimes it is just a decision not to give up. One very gentle step that refuses to move backward. One short prayer whispered in the middle of a difficult day. Yet it is precisely those very small steps that become the dividing line between the one who keeps moving forward and the one who chooses to stop. Because no one collapses in just one day, and no one drifts away from God in just a single moment. It all begins with very small steps, backward compromises that seem harmless. And then one day we realize that we are standing farther away from Him than when we started, and we do not even know why. The Bible has a statement that is very strong, but also very comforting. We are not of those who draw back to perdition. That verse does not come as a harsh rebuke, but as a gentle reminder that you belong to a different direction. Even if you are tired, even if you are standing in a place where your faith is no longer as clear as before, your identity is not that of someone who gives up. God sees you exactly where you are standing now, right in the middle of your confusion, your questions, and all those times you have prayed and heard no reply. Perhaps you are watching this video on a quiet evening, after a long, exhausting day, and something inside you feels heavy and low. You do not say it out loud, but you know that you are standing close to the edge of stepping back. Maybe it is only a little, but you can feel it. You know that you need a reminder, something that will help you stay where you are, something that will keep fear and exhaustion from dragging you too far away. And that is the reason we are having this conversation today. This video is not here to make you feel guilty, and it is not here to pressure you to act stronger than you really are. It is here so that you can remember this. Real faith is not faith that never shakes. Real faith is choosing to stand on God's side even when your heart is trembling. Real faith is not always about moving forward with great power. Sometimes it is simply refusing to move backward. In this video, we will take our time to walk a very slow, very deep journey together, to look again at the stories in the Bible, to listen to real experiences from real people, to see what is happening to our faith when God is silent, and to find a way to keep walking in the seasons when our prayers seem unable to reach the sky. If you have ever sighed and wanted to give up, if you have ever felt that your faith was as thin as a thread, or if you have ever looked up to the sky and said, God, I do not know what to do anymore, then the next part of this video is truly for you. This is a conversation between real people living real lives with real wounds, real disappointments, and quiet hopes that we sometimes feel too shy to say out loud. So sit down, take a deep breath, and allow your heart to open. We will walk through this journey together, gently, slowly, and very honestly. When we talk about faith that does not step back, we often think of big stories, miracles that change an entire life. But sometimes faith appears most clearly in lives that seem small and ordinary, like the story of Benaiah recorded in 2 Samuel. At that time, the weather was cold, snow was falling, the ground was slippery, and there was absolutely no reason for a normal person to go and chase a lion. No one expected him to do such a thing. No one stood behind him to push him forward. There was no prophecy that told him to go down into that pit, but he still did it. When we read this story in our younger years, we easily see it as a heroic act. But when we read it at 40, 50, or even older, the story carries a different meaning, one that feels closer and more real. It is no longer about fighting a lion. It becomes a mirror that reflects our own hearts. There are times when we know very clearly what is right, but we still stand still. There are things God stirs in our hearts, but we quietly ignore them. There are challenges that God wants to use to open a new door, but we stand 3 steps away, watching from a distance, hoping that if we pretend not to see them, they will simply disappear. Yet Benaiah chose another path. He stepped down into that cold pit, a place where every reasonable calculation said he should not go. There are moments in life when we also come to pits like that. A conversation we are afraid to have, a decision we always avoid, a small act of obedience that requires us to leave behind the safety we are used to. Those pits do not have claws and roars, but they carry their own kind of fear. When we are young, we can face challenges with a bold and daring spirit. But when we have already walked through almost half of our lives, we have learned too much about pain, about loss, about all the things that can go wrong. That is why stepping down into a pit, whether it is a pit of emotions, fear, responsibility, or obedience, becomes much more difficult. We are no longer afraid of the lion in front of us. We are afraid that we will not be strong enough. However, the most thought-provoking thing is this. It was exactly on that snowy day, in that inconvenient moment, in that dark pit, that the life of Benaiah opened into a new season. Not because of an easy victory, but because of a decision not to step back. Later on, he was entrusted with the responsibility of guarding King David. He became one of the most trusted men in the palace. But it all began with a moment that no one saw, a decision that he himself probably did not fully understand. Our spiritual lives are similar. One quiet moment of courage can open an entirely new season that we never expected. One time of choosing to face something instead of avoiding it can become a turning point, like a hinge that slowly swings open a very large door. Faith that does not step back is often not revealed in crowded churches or in worship services full of emotion, but in places that are very small, very cold, and very dark. Places where only you and God know what is happening. You may be standing at the very edge of a pit in your life right now. There is something that you know you must face, but you have delayed for months or even years. It might be forgiving someone who hurt you. It might be facing your fear of failure at work. It might be taking the first step in seeking healing for your own heart. It might be returning to prayer after a long time of silence. None of these things look like heroic battles, but sometimes those are exactly the places where God is waiting for you to step down, not so that you will fail, but so that you can find again the strength you have forgotten. If a man like Benaiah could go down into a pit on a snowy day, it was not because he was stronger than us, but because he was faithful to the call inside his heart. Then perhaps you can do the same thing in your own situation. It does not need to be loud or dramatic. Just one small step, but a step forward, not backward. In the next part, we will look at another story in the Bible, a story that is not only about facing fear, but also about walking forward when you have no idea what is waiting for you ahead. It is a story that reminds us that sometimes faith is not only standing firm, but daring to move into the unknown. If the story of Benaiah shows us the strength of facing what is difficult, then the story of Jonathan opens another perspective. Faith is not only daring to face something, but also daring to step forward when everything ahead is still uncertain. The situation of Israel at that time was truly suffocating. They were surrounded by the Philistine army. They had almost no weapons, and the hearts of the people were filled with fear. No one dared to think about fighting back. That situation is very similar to those seasons in life when every door seems to be closed, when you have no resources left, no strength left, and nothing in your hand to lean on. But in that exact moment, Jonathan spoke a sentence that sounded quiet, yet carried within it a huge movement. Let us go over to the camp of these men. Perhaps the Lord will act for us. The most remarkable thing is not his bravery, but those two words, perhaps the Lord. Jonathan did not receive any clear sign from God. He did not have a prophecy. He did not have a detailed military strategy. He did not have a guaranteed promise that victory was in his hands. He had only one thing, a small certainty in his heart that God could act, and that was enough to cause him to move. When we were young, we often waited for certainty. We wanted to know the result before we began. But after many years of living, we start to understand that God rarely draws out the whole map. He usually shows us only one step. And that step, small and fragile as it may be, becomes the place where faith reveals itself most clearly. Jonathan did not wait until the sky cleared to move. He did not wait for the soldiers' morale to rise. He did not wait to have more resources. He stepped out right when the situation was at its worst. That is something that many of us who have already lived through half of life can deeply understand, because we know that many of the most important turning points in life have happened in the messiest seasons. Sometimes the only thing we have is not a complete plan, but a deep breath and a decision in our heart that says, I will take one small step, Lord. The rest, I ask you to take care of. Sometimes that step is a phone call we have avoided. Sometimes it is the decision to return to church fellowship even when our heart still feels cold. Sometimes it is choosing to forgive someone when we no longer feel that we have the strength to forgive. Sometimes it is simply opening the Bible again after letting it sit and gather dust for a long time. These actions are not glorious or dramatic, but they are the steps that lay the foundation for a whole new season. There is one more thing that the story of Jonathan reminds us of. Faith is not a one-person journey. He did not go alone. Beside him was his armor-bearer, a man who was not famous, whose name is not written in any great list of honor, yet he played a very important role. He was the companion. Two men walked together. Two men stepped out together. Two men believed together. The presence of the armor-bearer meant that Jonathan did not have to step into that moment alone. In the spiritual life, there are times when you stand firm by your own faith. But there are also times when you can stand only because someone is beside you, quietly supporting you, quietly praying for you, quietly reminding you of what you yourself have forgotten. God never called us to walk alone. He knows there will be seasons when our legs are tired, our faith is thin, and our hearts are trembling. And He uses people to keep us from stepping backward in those seasons. There may have been times when you were the one who supported someone else, but today you might be the person who needs support. There's nothing wrong with that. That is the nature of the journey of faith. There are seasons when we are strong and seasons when we are weak, but the most important thing is that we are not alone in the turbulence of life. Jonathan walked forward in the midst of uncertainty, and we are the same. We do not always know what is going to happen. We are not always sure that we are enough. But faith does not demand certainty. Faith asks for faithfulness. Faithfulness to the step that God has placed in front of us. Faithfulness to the quiet call inside our heart. Faithfulness to what is right, even when what is right is not easy. In the next part, we will step away from the Bible stories and look back at our own lives. How faith that does not step back works itself out in everyday collisions, in long days full of worry, in sleepless nights, and in small things that seem unimportant but actually shape the entire spiritual journey of a mature person. When we reach a certain stretch of life, we begin to realize that true faith is not found in explosive moments, not in grand prayers, and not in miracles that make people marvel. True faith lies in what happens afterward, after the tears, after the disappointments, after the times we have fallen, after the silent stretches that we do not even know how to name. At 40, 50, or older, faith no longer feels noisy. It becomes more like breathing, invisible but indispensable. It no longer demands to be recognized, and it no longer needs to be displayed. It simply stands there quietly, like a marker deep in the soul. It is not tall, not dazzling, but more enduring than almost anything else. There are days when we pray and feel nothing. There are weeks that pass where we hear no personal word from God at all. There are months when the question, God, where are you, is spoken more often than words of thanksgiving. But you know, it is precisely in those quiet stretches that the faith of a mature person is formed most clearly. When everything in life is still going well, it is easy for us to believe that we are strong. But when God remains silent, when our prayers stretch on with no clear answer, when the world around us becomes blurry and uncertain, that is when we finally see where our faith is truly anchored. Some people place their faith on feelings. Some place it on miracles. Some place it on changing circumstances. And when those things are gone, their faith goes with them. But faith that does not step back chooses a different foundation, one that does not change with time, the character of God. He is the one who began the work, and he never leaves it unfinished. He is the one whose words are always kept. He is the one who is still working, even in the silence. There are things God does not so that we will see, but so that we will learn. Not so that we will be happy on the surface, but so that we will become deeper. Not so that we will look stronger in front of people, but so that our roots will cling more firmly to Him. And when faith has deep roots, it becomes less impatient. It no longer demands quick answers. It no longer panics at silence. It learns to stand still, not because it has given up, but because it trusts that God is working even when nothing can be seen. It is like an old tree in a yard. It is no longer bright green like when it was first planted. Its leaves are not as thick and vibrant as in its early days, but its roots have gone deep into the ground. Strong winds can shake it, heavy rains can bend it, but it does not topple. And perhaps because its roots have gone so deep, it can stand more firmly than the younger saplings. The faith of a mature person is like that. Not loud, not hurried, not full of many words, but very difficult to uproot. In this journey, we must accept a truth that is not easy. God does not work according to our schedule. He knows what needs to come first and what needs to come later. He knows when we are strong enough to step into a new season and when we still need more time to heal. There are things we consider delays, but in reality, they are preparations. There are doors we think are locked, but they are only waiting for the right time to open so that we will not be harmed. Faith that does not step back at its deepest level is the acceptance of this: I do not control my journey, but I believe that you are holding my hand. The words sound simple, but for them to come honestly from the heart, a person must pass through many seasons. Seasons of love, of loss, of growth, of silence, and sometimes seasons full of tears. Some people treat faith like a race, trying to run as fast as possible to reach what they want. But the faith of a mature person is more like a long journey. There are stretches where you walk very quickly, and then there are stretches where you can only move forward in very small steps. But the important thing is this: you do not move backward. Even if it is only a little, you are still moving forward, still keeping your heart turned toward God. In the next part, we will bring all of this back into daily life, into the work we do, the worries about money, the sleepless nights, the relationships full of tension, and the nameless fears. Because faith that does not step back cannot stay only in beautiful reflections. It must function in every corner of real life. When we bring what we have been reflecting on back into everyday life, we begin to see that faith that does not step back is not found in dramatic moments, but hidden in very quiet decisions. Decisions that seem so small that we often do not bother to tell anyone. Yet those are the very places where God lays bricks to rebuild the inner strength of a person who has walked through half a lifetime of fatigue. There are mornings when you wake up and your heart feels as heavy as stone. Nothing has happened yet, but a nameless sadness has been there since the night before. You make a cup of coffee, stand silently looking out at a small courtyard, and ask yourself, what will this day become? In that moment, faith that does not step back, does not show itself through a strong declaration. It is simply a very gentle decision. You open your Bible instead of letting your feelings lead you wherever they want. Just one small movement, but it keeps you from taking a step backward that you might not even notice. There are moments when the relationships in your family feel as tight as a thread, ready to snap. You want to stay silent to avoid conflict, or you want to ignore everything in order not to face it. But then you choose to lower your voice, to speak more gently, to be a little more patient. Not because it is easy, but because you believe that God is still working inside the cracks that no one else can see. One gentle sentence spoken on a bad day can be the very thing that saves a family from breaking a little more. That is also faith that does not step back. Some people are carrying heavy financial pressure, work is not going well, the future feels uncertain, every working day feels like trying to keep your balance on a very thin rope. But instead of taking shortcuts, instead of letting worry eat away at your integrity, you still choose to live honestly, to walk slowly but firmly, to believe that God sees your faithfulness in things that seem too small for anyone to notice. Sometimes faith that does not step back is simply refusing to trade your soul for temporary safety. There are people who've been praying for the same thing for many years. A marriage that needs healing, a child who is far from God, an illness that will not leave, a door that has not opened. The prayer goes on, to the point where you no longer know if you are asking or simply pouring out your heart. There are mornings when you almost want to stop and say, God, I am sure you do not listen to me anyway. But then one day, after one deep breath, you kneel down one more time. Not because you see hope more clearly, but because you do not want to step 1 inch further away from God. That is faith that does not step back. There are seasons when you think you have to be strong on your own, that you have to pull yourself together, that you must stand up and overcome everything by yourself. But in reality, the faith of a mature person is not about flexing spiritual muscles. It is about opening your heart to allow others to support you. Sometimes God sends into your life an old friend who calls you unexpectedly, a family member who has been praying for you in secret for a whole year, a very short message that arrives at just the right time, or a simple hand on your shoulder during a church service. These quiet things are the cords that keep you from drifting away. They are whispers from God saying, you do not have to fight alone. When you look back over your life, you will see clearly that there were seasons when you stood firm entirely because of the faith of others who held you up. There were seasons when you survived only because someone loved you with patient, unconditional love. It is in those seasons that you learn this. Faith that does not step back is not an individual achievement. It is a shared journey with helping hands, with prayers, with human presence that is very ordinary and yet deeply holy. Sometimes you are the weakest person in your home, but exactly when you see the least faith in yourself, God is using your weakness to show His strength in you. Faith that does not step back does not mean that you never tremble. It means that even when you tremble, you still refuse to turn your back on the one who has kept you through all these years. In the final part, we will come to a very gentle ending. Not to pressure you to become stronger, but to remind you that real strength does not come from you. It comes from the one who has never stepped back from you, even when you have wanted to step back from Him many times. If there is an evening when you sit alone in a quiet room, the light is not too bright, and the traffic outside has calmed down, it may be the moment when you can hear your own heart most clearly, not the loud dreams of your 20s, not the packed schedules of your 30s. At this age, what you want to hear is actually very simple, a confirmation that you still have enough strength to go on, that what you've been through is not meaningless, and that there is still a beautiful part of life reserved for you ahead. In that moment, faith that does not step back appears in a very strange image, not a blazing light, but a slow burning candle. It does not flare up, it does not shine spectacularly, but it does not go out. That candle is you. It is your journey. It is your faith. It is still burning, even if sometimes it is only a small flicker. And what matters is not how big the flame is, but that it keeps burning. In all the stories we've walked through, what remains the clearest is this: faith that does not step back does not demand that you become an extraordinary person. It only asks you to be faithful with what is left inside you, even if it feels small, thin, and shaky. Some people think that in order to move forward, they have to become as strong as they once were. But a mature person learns this: you do not have to become your old self again. You only need to become who you are today, with all your scratches, your exhaustion, the things you have lost, and the things that remain. God does not look at you through the perfect image you once tried to build. He looks at you through the truth of today, through eyes that have cried over things no one else knows about, through worries that you hide deep in your heart, through decisions you had to make when no one stood next to you, through the nights when you wondered whether you had done something wrong. And he speaks very gently, "You are still here, and so am I." Sometimes what discourages people is not the trial itself, but the feeling of being abandoned. The feeling that they have tried for many years, prayed many times, stood firm through many seasons, but God seems silent. That silence is what makes people want to walk away. But perhaps you have not yet seen that. In that silence, God has placed one of his deepest gifts, maturity. There are things he teaches us, not with words, but with silence. Not with miracles, but with time. Not with quick victories, but with waiting. Not with instant change, but with daily perseverance. If you look back over the years, you will probably see this. What has truly made you stronger is not the times when God rescued you quickly. It is the seasons when he allowed you to wait long enough for your heart to learn to cling to him, not to your circumstances. You are not a failure because you are tired. You are not weak because you have wanted to give up. Those things simply prove that you are human, and human beings are always limited. But right at the edge of that limitation, faith begins to grow. Trembling legs can still take a small step. A heart that is still confused can still choose to believe for one more day. God calls those small things faithfulness. If today you feel that you are standing at the edge of giving up, not because you no longer love God, but because you are just too tired, then please know this: God is not asking you to take a big step. He only asks that you do not step back. Just stand still for a moment. Just breathe. Just say, "Lord, please hold me." That is already enough to move heaven. Sometimes your faith is no longer a strong voice, but only a silence placed in God's hands. But silence can also be a form of faith. One tear can also be a prayer. One upward glance can also be a confession. One exhausted breath that still turns toward God is also an act of faith. And perhaps the most beautiful thing in your journey is this: God has never stepped back from you, even when you have stepped back from him many times. He is still there, not leaving, not losing patience, not changing his heart toward you. That is what allows you to believe that your story is not finished, that tomorrow still has hope, that a heart that has been wounded many times can still be healed, that your quiet faith can still become strong again in its own unique way. If you can take a few minutes after this video, just a few minutes, sit quietly, breathe slowly, and tell God everything you have been holding inside. You do not need fancy words. You do not need polished sentences. You only need the truth. You only need your heart. And ask him to give you a faith that does not step back. A faith strong enough to go through hard days, deep enough to endure long silences, and steady enough to stand even when you feel that you have very little strength left. Your faith has never been small in the eyes of God, and your journey is still going on. Lord, I come to you as I really am. I do not hide anything. I do not try to look strong. I do not cover up the exhaustion that only, Lord, there are days when I stand in the middle of life and have no idea what next step to take. There are times when I thought I was patient enough and strong enough, and yet I still tremble in front of things that are completely beyond my control. I know that my faith is not as big as I once believed it was. But today, the only thing I ask from you is not a very great strength, but a heart that knows how to cling to you, even if it is by a very thin thread of hope. Lord, please keep my heart from stepping back. Keep my feet standing firm when everything around me changes. Keep my mind in peace through the long nights when I cannot sleep. Keep my soul safe from invisible fears. And keep my faith from going out, even if right now it feels like only a small spark. Lord, if I must walk through a season of silence, please let me know that you are still there. If I must wait for a longer time, please help me to be patient without losing hope. If I must face things that I have avoided for so long, please give me the courage to step down as Benaiah once stepped into the pit. If I must walk a vague and uncertain road like Jonathan, please help me trust that you will walk with me. I ask that you heal what is broken inside me, restore what I believed I could never regain, and breathe new life into the parts of me that have dried out from tiredness. Please give me a faith that does not step back, a heart that does not close itself off, a hope that does not die out even when I can no longer see the road ahead. Please add strength to me. Please lift me up. Please draw me closer to you every single day. And please let me know that in every circumstance, I am never walking alone. Lord, I place myself in your hands with everything I have, even if it feels small, thin, and trembling. Please use what remains in me to continue writing the story that you began. I believe in you. I need you. And I choose to keep going, even if each step is very small, under your guidance and in your protection. Amen. If today's sharing has touched you, if you see yourself in these weary stretches of the journey, or if you simply need a place where your heart can rest and find new strength each day, I invite you to walk with this channel. Please subscribe so that whenever you need a gentle reminder, a small encouragement, or just a quiet minute to return to God, you will not have to walk alone. This space is for those who are still trying to stand firm, even if it is only with a small flicker of faith.